when you jump in like this, it's like it's either it's going to work or it's going to work. Welcome back to All In. I'm Rick Jordan, your host. My guest today, get ready for this. Joshua Fletcher Marsh. What's up, buddy?
I'm living someone's dream, my friend, coming to you hot and heavy from garage in British Columbia, Canada.
Hot and heavy. I was just in BC last week, and I was driving around because we're going to talk a lot about cannabis today. And I was driving around with an investor who's now a new friend, and he's showing me all the cannabis stores that exist, the storefronts in BC. And he starts telling me, he's like, yeah, a lot of them, they're getting pressure now, but they realize that they can't find the stores themselves. So now they're starting to, BC or Vancouver specifically is now starting to try to find the landlords, the actual property owners for this. And it just seems like a really hostile marketplace right now for cannabis in BC.
It very much is. I mean, I think that even though we're roughly 2 years into what, would be the initial legalization or end of prohibition of cannabis in Canada, doesn't mean that the colloquial infrastructure of banks or big business are ready for that yet. So it's still viewed as kind of a pariah motif, shall we say.
No doubt. And then I start thinking, it's like, who's got, I look, because I'm in the U.S., right? And you always ask the question, who's got something to gain out of this kind of pressure, or what's their agenda? Mm-hmm. And, I start thinking, I look around, because the same thing in the U.S., except we have 50 states, you have provinces or territories, and each one has their own set of rules, so to speak, or how they're going to deal with this. It's similar in that nature, I know. And then you look in the States, in some places, same thing, the banks and everything else, but other places, I know Florida, for example, because of the demographic and the age, is a big opioid community because it's generally a higher age and pain relief, legitimate uses for the opioids, but it's big pharma. Right. And those are the ones that are keeping that state from, it's legal medically now in the state of Florida, but not recreationally. And it's because of big pharma keeps lobbying against that. What's your thoughts on big pharma and this whole cannabis industry?
Well, I mean, in terms of big pharma, I think the basic statement to make about big pharma is they're threatened by cannabis. Why are they threatened by cannabis? Well, over 80% of any general population, regardless of where you're from, has a use for daily cannabinoids, whether we're talking something that's psychoactive based out of THC or something that's CBD based. There's a lot of healthier things out there in this new world of kind of more plant-based medicine that can actually replace a lot of their big money makers, which, like you said, opioids and other things like that. I mean, myself, I'm a neuropathic pain patient. And so I think that's definitely a big part of it big pharma is sort of threatened by it. A lot of the main companies in Canada are the super rich, and they were the ones who could afford to get into the game, quote unquote, where a majority of the people in Canada who are the growers that you would want to be sourcing things from, the people who've dedicated their lives to figuring out how it works and have a passion for it, have been priced out, right? So I think big pharma is scared, and big business has wanted to control a monopoly on it. But if you look at the track record of the last 2 years, almost every major corporation in Canada has been registering losses, the likes of which no one's ever seen.
Why doesn't big pharma just jump in on this bandwagon? To the point to where it's just, I want to try to get on this too, and I want to make money.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a developing thing. I mean, if you look at the prohibition of alcohol, right? I mean, it took 10 to 15 years to basically figure that one out. It took us a while to figure that one out. And I mean, cannabis in terms of its space is very much the same thing. I mean, we're still just in the sort of early days of figuring out legislatures and the way to make an inclusive industry. I look at it like beer. There's always going to be a Molson. There's always going to be a Labatt's. There's always going to be a big company. But then look at the craft explosion as well. I think there's enough marketplace to go around for anyone. I think they're just sort of coming to terms with the fact also that most of these big companies where they have capital, they don't have genetics. They don't have the understanding of really how to bring things to market. with an established industry. They neglected to take a look at how the industry itself, even if it was a gray zone or black zone thing before legalization, and how it functioned. So they basically decided to try to rewrite the rule book. They're like, well, this is just how it's going to work now, and people will jump on board, which was a huge error in terms of their calculations on that.
You think?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, no kidding, man. That's interesting. You're talking about the similarities between the craft beer market and the cannabis industry. And I know you say that you're the little guy in the industry too, but it seems like you're making some waves. How are you doing that? How are you and your team making waves, still being the quote unquote little guy?
How did we do this? I mean, well, at the end of the day, everything kind of started, and it's kind of been a domino effect. I've been kind of figuring things out as we went. Originally, when we started kind of what I call Potsquatch Growers on YouTube, and that's where it all started, really. I didn't start the YouTube with the dreams of creating it into a business. I mean, I'm sure I toyed around with the ideas since I was a kid, but originally I started that sort of media content to just sort of make information more accessible. And this information generation, there's so much stuff on the internet now of misinformation, and there's a lot of people at home who would like to either do it for rec or do it for medicinal. And trying to produce their own stuff. And it was almost impossible for me back in the day as a kid to teach myself how this stuff works. And a lot of trial error was a big part of how I did it. I failed a lot early on to learn the ways of the cannabis force, shall we say. But there's even more misinformation now. So I kind of started that, and then it kind of developed from there. And I saw YouTube brands and media brands around the world, and the way they were approaching an industry, I had a big issue with it. So at the end of the day, I've always been blunt, transparent, and, I've been a guy, quote unquote, swearing at the internet, having his beer and being honest about what my humble 2 cents are. That's one of the biggest sort of turns of phrase from our shows, my humble 2 cents. I personally feel this. And people relate to that. So I think where we're bringing the storm or bringing the ruckus, quote unquote, is that the people are resonating with the way we view things and the way we call it as it is. And we're not really afraid of lashback from the big people, right? So I would say just sort of a dedication to speaking the truth in terms of how I see it, and not compromising anything about my viewpoints. I mean, that's why we don't have any corporate sponsorships either. And that's why we started doing our own stuff. I mean, I was like, I'm not going to bow down to anybody there. So I'll do my own lighting brand, or I'll do my own line, or this or that, because at the end of the day, there's certain ways to do things and there's certain ways to not do things. And
yeah, for sure.
I guess I was blessed with thoughts.
I love it. On the flip side of that, you've got the big corporations that you're talking about, and you didn't take on corporate sponsors. I can almost see, I'm curious how you think about this. Sometimes having the big corporations involved almost validates a specific industry, if it's something new or something like that, because it's like, oh, these guys jumped on board, from a public perception point of view, is there something that you see to where there's a benefit of big corporations getting involved, or should this stay small?
100%. I mean, and that's sort of since day one, I've never had an issue with big corporate being part of anything. I've never been against it per se. I mean, maybe there's specific lighting brands or specific companies that I wouldn't want to work with, but it's not that I'm against big corporate. I mean, that's where we're at right now, is finding the right partner and the right partnerships where they see things the way that we do. So basically, as long as you're willing to get behind the brand of, people empowerment, we don't need to gouge people on pricing on things. We can make our money by providing a true service to people and becoming that trusted brand of people. As long as your corporation can kind of dance with that, then heck, let's go to the dance, let's have a good time. And so I definitely think there's very much a place for it. I mean, it's just finding the right ones who can jive with my eccentric nature, shall we?
there are those certain perceptions, right? I'm fortunate being in cybersecurity and my company going public. I have a board, and that was always a concern of mine too, because going from a private organization to a public organization, it will be big corporate. I will be running a big corporation, and bringing the people on board that it was key, like you said, finding the right partners. And anytime you want to expand, those who can still allow you to be you and actually value who you are and what you bring to the table. Of course, I don't know all the answers, So it's not
Oh
like,
yeah. So it's not like,
it's not like I'm going to be selling out per se. I found the right partners to jump on board with this thing and the right people to look up to in a mentorship role that are now on my board so that they can guide me. But at the same time, most of them are like, hey, if I don't have like a moral or ethical gut check, we're still voting Rick all the time because we believe in you.
yeah.
It's awesome that way, rather than finding people that, not all money is good money, when it comes to
I can
that.
attest to that.
Yeah, for sure, my man. So I love your thought process in this, and I think I'm starting to hear a lot of the motivation behind your group, and what's
Yeah.
the end game, or when you got into this, what did you think you wanted to do, at that point, and where did it morph into now?
Originally, I didn't think anyone would tune in. To be fair, it's my production value is something that I'm still learning to try to make it a little prettier, necessarily for a media brand. I'm more of an in front of the camera kind of guy, being an actor, writer, comedian as well by trade, and so we were always kind of grassroots with that. And I figured, hey, I got a cell phone. I've got a few things I put into my brain. I'm going to provide an alternative place for me to share at least my take on things in terms of the space. And if people tune in, great. And if people don't, they don't. And then it was slow going at first, you know what I mean? But then all of a sudden one morning I woke up and there was people there. And I was like, oh, man. And so originally, my thoughts were, when the first legalization happened, was I would start a craft set up, and I would just go do that. I would be the quote unquote pot farmer boy, and that would be good to go, and we'll do it that way, and it'll be good to go. But I got priced out of that market. I mean, I didn't have the financial clout to meet the extremely expensive bureaucracy and red tape of Health Canada. So I had to shift gears, because either everything I've been working towards is now gone, or I can find an alternative way forward, which is what led us to building the international community. Everything I do in terms of teaching people is all free. I don't charge people money for that. I do a lot of donations of my time to different people around the world, and try to help that way. But that's what led to eventually starting our lighting brand. It was something I'd been toying around with. Then I had a run in with a very large company and publicly told them what I thought about them. And it was kind of the kick in the pants to get things going. And then I found the right partner in a small company out of California, who was, by and large, their name is Soul Strip. And big shout out to Brett out there. Thank you for all that you do, buddy. I originally called him, and I just wanted to get the parts that he sells. He had really good strips and he had really good quality built stuff. But very quickly, no pun intended, we saw things in a similar light. We decided to kind of co-brand and work together. That's kind of what led to that initial thing. And that's when I started to realize that, like, this is something that's happening here, even though we're going an alternative route, even though it's not necessarily what I had envisioned ever once in my lifetime, how this will go. And I realized that we can achieve things if we just work our duffs off and keep going, which is what led to the CBD line that we launched. Right now, I'm in the process of actually selling my current house to market's hot right now where I live. So I'm going to go get into a bigger mortgage, buy a property where I actually have land to build a facility in the backyard, and take that craft reality, which we had to put on the back burner years ago, to reality now. And we're also going to be launching genetics and making genetics affordable. That's been our basic mantra with everything we've done going forward, was just, people are gouging people. It doesn't cost this much to bring technology to market. It doesn't cost this much to make genetics or to sell genetics. It doesn't. Let's pass that on to people, right? And that's kind of been our motif going forward. And it's just kind of been one random happenstance and being creative leading to the next hurdle. And kind of, as you're jumping over that hurdle, you may not even know where you're going to land yet. You just kind of decide, like, oh, right, that looks like stable brand. Let's do that.
Man, there's been this recurring theme these past couple of days, and everybody that I've talked to is that's the case. It's like you can't see 3 steps in front of you. And when you can't, that's usually a good thing, right? You just jump in, and then it's right there for you. Everything you've been waiting for. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a little creativity, a little tenacity. And I mean, hold on to your core values that kind of started you on your journey. And if you can stay true to that and there's going to be hard days. There's going to be days where you feel like you want to smack yourself over the head. And there's going to be other times where you feel really positive about a success you may have, and it's about, keep on stroking and keep on going and, have faith in the mission, and eventually you'll figure it out. So
Eventually, for sure. It always happens. It always just presents itself at some point when you don't expect it. I'm sure, especially with this industry, your show, Potsquatch Growers, has this not helped people, who are feeling alone and everything in this world? I love your approach to this.
And I think that was one of the unforeseen things that has come out of our show. Because originally I started it just wanting to help people learn. Like I said, I am an actor and a comedian, and I do a lot of weird voices. And basically, the character of the Potsquatch that I do on the show is essentially a toned down version of who I really am in day-to-day life. I mean, there's nothing new or made up about that. And I sort of, after a while, we're getting thousands of emails from people around the world just saying, like, sharing their personal stories, and people struggling with PTSD or chronic depression. Or, for example, this guy and his mother, she was on her deathbed with stage 4 cancer, but their favorite time of the week was they'd sit down and watch my show. And I'm sitting here going, like, in my mind, I'm just this balding, bearded idiot in Canada living in the woods. Showing up and saying what I think, and but bringing sort of my natural view of humor to things, or making it this or that. And I mean, a lot of people just shared this appreciation, right, that I didn't see coming. It was one of the most humbling experiences ever, just valuing what we do and saying thank you for making my world a brighter place and bringing laughter into it. And I'm like, whoa, and some of these people are going through a lot. Like, I mean, some of these emails were heartbreaking to read. And I mean, I kind of wish, I was maybe 20 years down the road and I have the global brand even more established, and I have, excess money to where I could have helped a bit more. Right. But at least I was able to bring laughter into it. And on the darkest days, sometimes that smile or that laugh is what gets you through. Right. And so, I didn't realize that's what we were doing. I didn't realize that that's what we were becoming to many. But when they shared it was very moving, very humbling. And it kind of gave me kind of more inspiration to keep going with what we do. Like, okay, so if we're valued by the people in this way, well, then let's get into these different branches of business, and let's approach it with the same tenacity, the same mindset. And that's how you're going to make a winning global brand, because, people the world over, regardless of your culture, regardless of your ethnicity or orientation or your religion. I mean, the human race likes cannabis. Most of us involved in it love it. And it's something that, regardless of all these differences of opinion, we can still relate on it and kind of begin to build this community in a happy space and a dialogue. And so I said, heck, let's go for it. Let's throw our hat in the ring and just let's see what happens.
That's awesome. There's any kind of business. It doesn't matter if it's in like a controversial industry or not. So I mean, even more so, I mean, you've got the balls, man, and you just jumped into it. That's awesome. So many will just stop right at the point, they'll figure, hey, I tried 17 times, when it's just that 18th time. Then that's all that would take in order for things to break open, or it just takes, screw everything that I've heard, screw everybody that's telling me you shouldn't do that, or can't you be happy where you're at right now, or there's no way this is going to work. When you jump in like this, it's like, it's either it's going to work or it's going to work. There's no other option.
Well, that's the way I look at it too, right? Like, I mean, to quote the rebel part of me, growing up, I was always, I'm the son of two priests, right? I was the actor, writer, black sheep son of the family. I'm the eldest. And
welcome to the club, buddy.
I don't care what the rules say, right? Like, rules are made to be broken. And just because industry says, like, if one of my competitors, right? Like, I mean, they say, oh, well, things should cost this much, or we should do things this way, or this is the value. Oh, you can't do that because that's not how the industry works. Well, I say, you're going to have to kill me to stop me because I don't agree with it. I'm going to do it my way. And whether you like it or not, tough cookies. And then just smile and laugh.
Isn't it fun to make people speechless sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably been one of the personal enjoyments for me. Is like, I won't lie to you, I do love pissing off the big companies that are my competitors, and They try to bring us down. It's funny that you work in cybersecurity. When we launched our new updated lights, we basically went from 28 failure points down to 8 or 9.
Awesome.
Stepped up our chip game on our lights. We redesigned them so everything was uniform. It was fixable. Like all of our tech, we designed to be fixable. Like I'll sell you a replacement part. It can be maintained. It can be upgraded. Which none of the other companies do that. They're like, well, once it breaks, you got to buy another one. Well, I don't care if that's how consumerism works. I'm not going to do it that way. And so they hacked our website. It was a low-level hack where they just redirected our domain portal pathway. And so, yes, do we have to go rebuild and do a more secure thing on WordPress, which is what we did? Of course, and that was frustrating. But I mean, at the end of the day, that was almost validation for me. Like we're doing something so well that these people are that threatened by us.
Right on. When you're doing something hard, it's worth it. When you've got haters, you know you're doing it right.
I agree. And I certainly have a few of those.
Good. It makes life so much more fun, doesn't it?
Well, I did grow up watching George Carlin a lot, right? And Robin Williams. So for me, it makes sense.
Yeah, I feel you. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. So your CBD line, where is that and where can you find your product in the US? Because you're in
well, basically right now we're just on online payment portal, or not payment portal, purchase portal, I guess I should say. Forgive my non-knowing the computer lingo things. It's not my strong suit. But so right now we are available on the internet. Going forward in the new year, I was just talking to my business partner at Potsquatch Holdings, my friend Blake. Hi, Blake. Shout out to you, Blake. And we've decided to kind of aggressively build a new sales team. We're going to be going after retail locations in all legal states and start sort of in the next number of weeks trying to get it out there and getting it into stores. Because, with our CBD line, I kind of said to my friend Blake there, and I said, man, like, we have to make this affordable because, like, if you look at similar products to what we're bringing to market right now, they're charging colloquially, $80 to $120 for this. And the way I look at it is, what good is medicine people can't afford?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, this will help you so much, but you cannot afford it. At least you want to tell your child or your home. And then
channeling some Robin Williams. I think I heard some Billy Madison in there too. There's
a lot of different things in my head, and so I said to Blake, I was like, man, if you're down with making this successful, if we agree that, hey, let's make maybe a smaller percentage of profit per singular unit, with the end goal of actually winning over the market by serving the people. And if you guys can jive with that, I say, let's go for it. And Blake, since day one, has always been like, dude, I love it. I agree with you. Let's go for it. And so that's kind of what we're doing now. We're going to be rolling out new products every 2 to 3 months. Our next product we're going to be launching is our CBD gummy line. And because at the end of the day, I'm obviously I'm a little corporation. I'm not against making money, but at the same time, I think we can also, as companies, help to empower people, give back to people, and provide a realistic service, regardless of what colloquial standards of industry are. How did standards change? How does development and evolution happen in any industry? Well, some people come along and say, to quote the old rock song, we're not going to take it. You know what I mean? And we'll change the way it works. And so right now it's just online strictly, but we will be hopefully in the next coming months available in a bunch of retail locations. That's one of the things we're looking into is to find the right, whether it's brick and mortar chain stores or singular mom and pop operations or people who also have their own online stores.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do business with anybody as long as you're good people and you don't mind honoring the MSRP that we wish to be brought to market, just because it's been done purposely for the people. There's still enough money for us all to make out of. Then hey, I'm happy to do business with any of it. So
that's awesome. That's really cool. So we've talked about Potsquatch. Dude, where did that name come from?
This is a funny story.
Good.
So, all right, so story time with UnclePotsquatch, everyone. Let's go back in time. When I got my first medical permits, okay, so Canada, we've had, there's the ACMPR system now, which is how medical cannabis licensing works for personal production. Before that system, there was the MMARP program. That was the first license I held many moons ago. Before I could get my doctor to sign off on my application form, because back then there was 4 different forms, one of which was your doctor had to fill out. Now there's only 2. It's simplified. We went from 48 pages down to like 4, which is good. But they put me through a lot of medical testing. So I began to find out that I am not genetically the standard human being. I've got a 34 and a half size jaw, which is strange. Neanderthals had a 34. My skull's way thicker than it should be. Like as a joke, I put my picture into one of those Neanderthal, like it'll convert your face into a Neanderthal.
Oh, Lord.
My picture popped out the same as it went in, which was strange. And so long story short, I just sort of like, I've got higher bone density than I should, but I'm not, my bones aren't brittle. Right. So I was telling my buddies on a camping trip years ago, about these weird medical things about myself that I was finding out because my doctor wouldn't sign unless I did all these tests. And so we were having beers around the campfire out in the woods, as Canadians do. And I made the joke to him, like, well, my grandmother must have slept with a Sasquatch. And that then led to me getting this nickname Sasquatch. So people have been calling me Sasquatch for well over a decade now. And when I was starting the brand and the channel years ago, I was like, well, heck, what will I call myself? I mean, well, everybody calls you Sasquatch, so maybe let's work with that. That's something that's, something Okay, well, weed squatch, that sounds silly. Cannabis squatch, well, that has horrible flow to it. And then eventually I went, Potsquatch. Ooh, that sounds fun. And then I was like, well, what do we do on the channel? What are we talking about? Well, we're growing. We're growers. So Potsquatch Growers. And then, so that's kind of just sort of how it happened. But it all comes from the Canadian healthcare system and trying to get my first license. And my doctor would not sign unless I, became a guinea pig for a while.
Oh, geez. That guy had some ulterior motives, maybe.
Well, who knows? Maybe my genetics are on some government laboratory list somewhere in secret. I don't know.
Exactly. No joke. That's sort of what I was thinking. Yeah. Along those lines. Yeah. So what's next, my man? I mean, where do things go from here? Where do you see the market going from here as a whole? Because you see the slow adoption that it's okay and it's not freakish and it's not something that is, to be feared or anything like that. We're the next 5 years for this industry.
Well, the industry in general, I think one of the biggest unforeseen booms I've been aware of it the whole time, but that a lot of people don't seem to get is like a lot of big companies are like, well, we'll just produce cannabis and people will buy it. That's kind of where their sights have been. That's not true. I think probably one of the biggest unforeseen explosions a lot of people aren't aware of is the grow your own movement, which is producing your own plants at home. Like in Canada now under legalization, every household's allowed 4 plants. It's not a lot, but you'd be surprised what you can produce with 4 plants if you know a few tricks. And that is where I really do foresee a huge explosion in the industry, is both on the tech side as well as the knowledge-based side. Anything associated with at-home growing, that's going to be a huge, because more and more people by the day, like you said, are kind of becoming more comfortable with it. They're more open to it. They're like, oh, this is a thing where I'm not a bad boy or girl anymore doing this. Like, it's okay now. And maybe they secretly, even though they were super anti-pot their whole lives, a lot of my students are that way. They spent their whole lives ridiculing it, being against it. Many are police officers or SWAT team members or military members who are retired now, who spent their lives being super against it. But now they're like, oh, wait, this is okay now. And so that's going to be a big evolution there. I think in Canada, at least, we'll see how the legalization in the States goes. That's the big thing to watch out for the States, is how will legalization on a federal level be rolled out there? Dear America, from Canada, don't do what we did. We screwed it up. It didn't create a healthy industry. It's led to hundreds of millions of dollars being lost by many. I do believe that we will eventually find ourselves into something very similar to beer. There will be Molson's, there will be Labatt, but there will be this huge craft element. Craft cannabis is what the consumer wants. Nobody wants a big farm-produced thing that's been sitting there for a year, that's been sprayed with chemicals and irradiated. They don't want that. That's not what they fell in love with cannabis in the first place from. It was sort of more mom and pop craft style growing, a smaller production, more boutique style. And that's really what people want. And the fact is just because something's boutique in this industry doesn't mean your cost of production is overly high. especially when you start incorporating new technologies like light emitting diodes and green friendly tech in terms of your setups, which has always been my secret nerd passion. That's going to be a big thing. Right now, missing from the space, I think, is genetics. Most genetic producers in the world are gray zone. Last 15 to 20 years, most breeders out there have not been properly taking the time to breed the right strains and do things. So, like, there's a stress-based mutation that happens called a foxtail, for example. So here's your bud. Like, let's picture it like that. And normally it looks like this. But then sometimes you'll get these weird tails kind of looking like stacks coming off the tops all the time. Like when I was a kid growing, you would rarely see a foxtail on something, which is it's a stress-based trigger within the plant's genetic. Genetics foxtail all the time now, right? So for my personal plan for the next 5 years, is that's one of the things why I'm selling this house and buying a new place, is so that I have the space where with the right private investors working with me, we're still looking for some of those, for those of you out there listening at home, to build this facility and start creating these genetics. And so I'm kind of writing off the last 20 years. I'm going to go back to old school genetics. We have a huge genetic treasure trove of things that, me and a few of my members working with me on this have collected over the last number of decades. And we're going to kind of try to rebuild new strains, but from the old genetic sources using modern day approaches and doing it properly. So that's our personal next 5 years, is that and the craft and then genetics. I think in terms of the world for the next 5 years, I think we're going to see a huge explosion around the world of acceptance of this. This will one day be a normal industry. It will be no different than cheese. It will be no different than fine wine or any form of true artisanship, high-end boutique product. That doesn't mean there's not a huge place in the market for people who will buy the Labatt's or the Molson's version of weed, right? But most consumers, they want that sort of special extra, right? So I think we'll see a competitive, inclusive market, or at least I hope we will, where all players will be allowed in. And that's one of the things, like, for example, our little company, the large companies have no interest in developing genetics. They have no interest in selling seeds. I know that because I talk to them regularly these days. What they want, though, is they do want people who know what they're doing. They do want people who are developing these things. So it will become more of a tissue culture motif for the big companies, right? Like think of McDonald's, right? A Big Mac has to taste the same in America as it does in China. It has to taste the same in Canada as it does in Europe. That's what these big companies are craving. So I think tissue culture for the big companies is going to be a big thing. So, word out to you, smaller growers out there who may be listening, developing those, eccentric strains that are special and you took the time to do right, there will be a very big business to licensing out those to the larger companies. Which will then, help your smaller company have a revenue stream coming in from these large companies to then kind of be developing the next generation, the next this, the next XYZ, etc.
And that's the right, that's the right business move for the small growers too, isn't it? Licensing their intellectual property. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with working with the big people. A lot of people think I'm just sort of some, screw the big companies. No, screw the big companies that are not being nice. And if they're trying to challenge me on something, I'm not afraid to speak out against you. But at the same time, I think there could be a very healthy, all-inclusive industry where big business and smaller business works together. We value each other and what we do. We can make the dream team and sort of take over this evolving industry. So for the next 5 years, it'll be a globally evolving industry. More and more countries are kind of opening up to the concept of it and being willing to do that, passing legislature that's pro it. New Zealand recently almost got there, but then they didn't quite. They were off by like 1 or 2%. I feel bad for my friends in New Zealand, but that's why they're moving to Canada to come work with me now.
Fun. A lot of opportunity all around for sure, my man. So Potsquatch Growers. That's so fun to say. Potsquatch.
I have fun with it too.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of, we built this community now, right? And it's kind of become this cool thing where, we all the Potsquatchers, we all the Potsquatch Growers Army, we all the grow your own movement. This was about a year and a half ago. I had a really cool experience happen. So all of a sudden there was one of my American viewers posting on one of my videos going, hey, who was at such and such elementary school the other day picking up their kids? I drove around the block twice. And so this is a tiny town somewhere in the States. I can't remember the state off the top of my head. But they go, someone else had a Potsquatch Growers sticker on their car. I thought I was the only one in town. So I've got these, small American communities where people are making friendships now because they see the sticker, they see the hat, they see the shirt, and they're like, oh, I wear that too. And then they're kind of coming together. And I never would have guessed that it would have become this thing where it's this community, this movement. The people are proud to be this, and all different walks of life, from the left to the right, to the middle, to any color, to any orientation, to any country. And we're actually all getting along. I mean, man, there must be a way to equate this to actual global politics and society. Because right now, on a microcosm, we're all getting along just fine. So, maybe there's a way to kind of expand this out. I don't know. But it's pretty cool, though.
It is really cool. So to join your Potsquatch army, PotsquatchGrowers.com, is that where everyone should go?
PotsquatchGrowers.com is right now our pretend store. I've been running into issues with payment portals. Remember how at the beginning of the show you were mentioning how big business seems to kind of be anti-us? So we keep being called a pot company. We don't actually currently sell any flower, any genetics or pot directly. We're a media brand. We sell hats and t-shirts, lighting tech, CBD, which is all legal where it's being done in the States. But big banks have always given us an issue, and online payment portal companies. I've been through 9 in the last 4 months trying to find a payment portal for our website to work.
Wow.
So it's still right now more of a pretend store, but they can check out Potsquatch Growers on YouTube is our main kind of initial media brand. That's where you stay up to date on stuff. We have a Facebook group called the Potsquatch Growers Community. As long as you treat people respectfully, everyone's welcome. And heck, you'll get to see some behind the scenes stuff of my silliness, being like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what we're doing. Like, for example, today, right now, I'm waiting to find out if they could remove their conditions on a property. I have my offer waiting to be given to the sellers if they can't remove conditions by 6 p.m. tonight. So
Fun.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
No doubt. Well, good luck with that, my man. Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation today, brother. This has been amazingly insightful, and I'm sure all of our listeners collaboratively will see that too. Joshua Fletcher Marsh. Why the 3 names? That was my last question for you. Why all 3?
Well, basically, when my parents were getting married back in the moons of yesteryear, basically my dad said to my mom is, if you want to take my name, that's fine, but I don't agree with you losing your name to take mine. So if you want my name, you've got to keep yours, and our kids have to have both names too. So Fletcher is my mom's name, and Marsh is my dad's name.
It's not hyphenated. It's just
it is on some documents. Sometimes they put a space, sometimes they put a hyphen. It is quite the mouthful, especially if you include the middle name, Joshua David Fletcher Marsh. I mean, there's a few syllables. But that's just me. And I mean, like when I became an actor, that's why I just went with Josh D. Fletcher. A little bit easier. In other business circles, I'll go by Josh Marsh because it's simpler there. I don't need to use the whole thing.
Well, it's very regal how I read it as Joshua Fletcher Marsh. I like that.
Not bad for a guy who comes from 4,000 years of serfdom.
For sure. Joshua, thanks again, my man. It was a pleasure having you on.
Back at you. Thank you for having my friend.
What's shaking? Thank you for joining me on the All In Podcast. Click the subscribe button and smash that bell for notifications. Text me. 312-535-8520. Follow me on social media at Mr. Rick Jordan. See you next episode. I am Rick Jordan, and I approve this message.